To maximize your viewing experience, please refer to the resource packet for helpful tips and resources regarding first-year experience advising and counseling.
It takes a lot of courage to say, this is not where I want to be, this is not what I want to do. I'm going to begin all again.
I originally wanted to go out of state like everyone else does, go to a big 4-year.
Didn't make the best choices to start off with.
Partying a little harder than I probably should.
I really started to focus and get more involved in my grades just because of the type of teachers that I had.
If community college didn't exist and it was just universities, there's no way I'd be able to have started college.
I kind of wish you guys would have came last semester to see how big of a difference there is in me.
Recent nationwide studies reveal that 67% of freshmen entering college intend on achieving at least a bachelor's degree, but only 25% actually complete their goal. Why are schools losing so many students? How can we improve the first-year experience, thereby increasing retention and improving student success? The first-year experience for college students plays a major role in determining retention rates and student success. Providing only a mere orientation program, or even worse, neglecting the first-year experience, can prove disastrous for student success and completion rates. For your information, it's about first-year experience, Part 1. We explored best practices for first-year experience programs, comparing Maslow's hierarchy of needs to the first-year experience. In Part 2, we will tell 2 success stories. One is about Seward County Community College, a small college in Kansas that has organized its faculty and staff to use their available resources to improve their retention and completion record, and in so doing, move those rates to a level that brought them the 2013 Noel and Randy Levitz Retention Excellence Award. In addition, Seward was recognized by the Aspen Institute in 2012 as being one of the top community colleges in the nation. The second story is about the Texas Completes initiative that consolidated 5 community college systems who, up until organizing, worked independently on multiple student success initiatives, which were too fragmented to have the impact they knew they could have on the completion rates of their combined 289,000 students, and how they changed their success rates by focusing on initiatives that could scale up to have a statewide effect.
When I walk down the hallways, what I really enjoy seeing is our faculty and staff talking to the students. We know that a lot of students coming to us, as I said, they're first ones in their family to go to college. And we know that there's a certain level of anxiety to be the trailblazer, if you will, within the family. What I really appreciate is just seeing the individual interaction. A lot of our students, because that wasn't their initial plan to go to college, they may not have planned well in high school. They may not have participated, they may not have prepared. So the more that we can tell them that they're valued as an individual, and even though they may not have been in the top 10% and they weren't real active in high school, the fact that now they're in college, they can still complete that, get involved in an activity, build those relationships, know the faculty members by first name. All those aspects are just making it important to them to know that they're doing a good thing.
It's always been really important to us here at Seward County Community College Area Technical School, the topic of retention. But it really wasn't up until probably 8 years ago that we realized that we really didn't have a college-wide retention initiative. We had silos. We had people in the TRIO office that worked on retention initiatives. We had a Title III grant that worked on retention initiatives and different offices, but collaboratively we didn't have one. So our AQUIP steering committee asked if we would create one. And in doing so, it was real interesting. We did some research on best practices. We talked about who would write this plan. We talked about how many years this plan would last. And in doing so, determined that we really didn't want a plan, because the plan has a start and then an end. And then at the end, what happens? And so we decided it would be a better vehicle for us to develop an ongoing retention committee that had all the different components across the college campus, that had all those best practices involved in this group, that collectively could look at the data and decide what initiatives do we need to put into place that could help move our college from here to here.
That's when we began to look at NACADA and best practices, and what are other people doing in the nation having to do with advising specifically. We hadn't even thought about retention at that point. We're just trying to improve our advising system. And so during that, because of that grant, several different advisors and instructors, because we have faculty advising here, were able to go to a NACADA Summer Institute and get some hands-on training through the NACADA, and I was privileged to be able to go and do that. We adopted their model of teaching as advising, and we really, in our professional development and our training of our advisors, we talked about teaching as advising. You spend the time preparing for your class, so when your students come in, you're ready for them to educate and teach them, and the same is so for advising. You need to have some things prepared for them, and so we educated our advisors on those principles. And then during that year too, because of the grant, we began to have learning communities for our advisors. And so we had Advising Scholars Program, and we still have that to this day. And that's how we train all new advisors that come in on all the different things that we're doing.
We were very fortunate to receive a STEM grant about 1.5 years ago, and we were able to put in a math lab here at the college. We've learned that students that are struggling academically, about 80% it's math. And so we're having that support for our students. And then just learned a few months ago that we received another grant that will allow us to open up a writing center this spring. So as part of then the retention committee, we took a look at who on campus was instrumental with some of their retention initiatives, or who had a passion for retaining their particular population, and really determined that the person in charge of the freshman year experience course, and here her name is Patsy Fisher, she coordinates the curriculum for that course, and she trains the teachers of that course so that all the incoming freshmen get that same information that's so critical throughout that first year to try to retain them.
When we start the first year seminar, every semester we run about 224 students. And I teach 2 classes generally because I want to still stay in the loop with what kids are doing, what kids are thinking. And you can see the ones that are really focused and the ones that have that support system. That is so important. When you have a support system, you have parents, you know who to turn to. But some of our students that are coming, they're first generation. Their parents didn't go to college. They are branching out on a new endeavor that they're not familiar with.
About 3 years ago, our committee really looked at our changing demographics here in Liberal, Kansas, and at the college, and saw that our Hispanic community and population was really growing to the point that we went from something like 15% Hispanic to now this year 44% Hispanic students at our college. They were completing their college 3-year graduation rates of about 25%. And so we thought we really need to work on that initiative so that we help improve their completion rates. So what we did, or some of the things we did to address that, was we decided to go right to our student body and ask them the question, why do you think that's happening? So we went to our student leadership, HALO, our student leadership group for our Hispanic students, and we asked them, why do you think your peers aren't completing their degree? Or if you don't complete your degree, what barriers are you facing right now that would keep you from that? They really did want to complete their 2-year degree and transfer on, but they told us if they weren't going to complete, or their peers weren't going to complete, the reasons were financial, not being able to afford to stay in school and pay their bill, juggling families and going to school at the same time. They didn't feel real familiar with the whole academic rigor didn't really understand the GPA, the satisfaction, academic progress, some of the natural things that other students might know.
Coupled with that high percentage of first-generation students, over 85% of our students end up having to take a developmental class too. We're like any other two-year college. A lot of our students are non-traditional, so they've been out of school for a while. They come back, they take the assessment, find out that their reading or their math scores aren't as high as they need to be. Plus we have several coming right out of high school that maybe didn't do that well in high school, didn't pay attention, weren't planning to go to college. For whatever reason, their assessment scores aren't as high as they need to be. So we have a high percentage of students that are already facing a struggle when they come in.
So anyway, we got all that information and we brought it back to the committee and said, what are we going to do with that? What initiatives can we put in place to try to give this population the support that they need to continue so we can change those graduation rates from the 25% and get it up to the national average and push it even further if we can. So some of the things that we did were we offered more financial aid assistance days to help students fill out their FAFSAs. We offered it in bilingual, English and Spanish. And then we also visited with our English department. And we said, is there any way that you might be able to offer an assignment in English Comp 1 that would teach students how to write an essay so that they can use that essay when they complete their scholarships? Because they also told us in the focus groups that they didn't fill out scholarship essay information because they're intimidated with that whole process. So our English department, a little reluctant at first because they already had a full curriculum, decided to pilot it 1 year. And it was so popular with the students and it had so much meaning to the students where they felt like they were doing an assignment that meant something to them that the next year they instrumented that assignment throughout all the English 1 courses. And so the students had the tools to write the essay and therefore apply for more financial aid if need be. That was one of the practices. We also looked at our early intervention program on campus, and we saw that we weren't really intervening with students at risk till about midterm. And we decided that's way too late. If someone starts struggling that first day of school, that first week of school, we need to do an intervention so that we can get them back on track so they don't get derailed. And so what we decided to do was to advertise campus-wide that if anybody sees a student for whatever reason is struggling, whether that's in class, whether that's crying in the hallway, whether that's a student talking about not having the financial means to continue, whether that's our housing director seeing a student that's not going to class, any of them can use this email address to alert the at-risk committee. Then we meet immediately and decide who's going to follow up with that student, whether it be the counselor, whether it's a housing director, whether it's the academic achievement center director.
You're out of high school, you're out of your parents' house, you know, they don't have to watch you. You know, nobody's gonna, you know, you're not constantly watched, so you're not gonna even think about, you know, you're gonna do every bad thing possible. You know, I was contacted about, you know, that I was put in the at-risk program because I didn't even realize it, but I hadn't gone to class for 2 months. And I was just like, no, I just went to class yesterday. No, you didn't. You know, I had 2 months had flown by before I had even realized anything. And they were already trying to get a hold of me as it was, so I was just like, all right, guys, you know what? I got some problems. And the person who I went to when I was just like, I know I got a problem, his name's Paul. He was the dorm manager up in the Hill Court.
I tell my students in my first year seminar class, you're mine now, and I will follow you and I will hunt you down like a dog. When they don't show in my class, I go look them up. When I get the early alert list that is sent out, we gather the names the 4th week from instructors. It's not mandatory that all the instructors participate. I wish it were, but it's not. We make it's by choice. Those letters, those names are submitted the 4th week. The letters go out to the students the 5th week, and it just may say, early alert in English because of assignments, lack of assignments completion, or quizzes, tests, whatever. And we get that list of how many students every semester. And I look through that with a fine-tooth comb. I go through. I want students to know I really care and that Seward County cares. We want them to be successful because they're our selling point. Retention is a big thing, and if we did something for a student, word travels.
At the time, I really didn't put much focus into my studies, but as time went on, at least here at the school, I really started to focus and get more involved in my grades just because of the type of teachers that I have.
And we kind of divide and conquer, if you will. And that was a practice that was really adopted by the whole campus community, and we talk about that at the beginning of every year so that they really know if they drop a name to us that they feel is at risk, we will follow up and we will do what we can to try to keep them in school. So those are some of the initiatives that we did, and through these initiatives, and again, it's a college-wide initiative, not just this committee. We just are the vehicle to push some things forward. Our graduation rates for our Hispanic population went from 25% to 41% in a 3-year period. So we seem to be very successful, and that was why the college received the Noel Levitz Award of Excellence for Retention Strategies this last year. So we're very proud of that.
I'm helping college students figure out what they're going to do for the rest of their life, and for our student population, first generation, low-income students, the thought that they would even come to college, and then to have the opportunity to sit down with them and say, let's look at what what your plans can be and what you're capable of and what education can do for you. And the success stories just kind of roll out from there.
Oh, also our TRIO director. We have student support services, and retention is very important to our TRIO director. They work with 160 first generation low income students, and so a population that's very, very hard to retain. They have certain retention goals, and have been very successful. So we included that person, Gayla Myers, on our committee to share some of their practices and to work too collaboratively as a unit to try to again move the college from here to here with either retention, persistence, or completion. Because we really believe now it's a college initiative, not just a Francis Brown in the Academic Achievement Center or a Rhonda Kinzer in the counseling office. If a person thinks they're coming here and they're taking classes and they don't see how it's all going to fit, then it's easier to drop out. So we want to make sure that they see how it fits and they can see the progression and where it's going to lead them. 2 years ago, we did an advisor intake survey where we asked advisors, what do you think are really key skills to be a good academic advisor, to be efficient and effective? What skills would they be? And I went ahead and looked at the National Academic Advising Association model through NACADA and listed some of those skills. And then they ranked which ones they thought were really important. And then they also ranked what skills they felt where they fell into that area, whether or not they felt really competent or whether or not they struggled in that area. And they told us what they thought they needed. So then after we got that, we went ahead and put together a comprehensive staff development, ongoing training with advisors. It's very critical. We're very key that we have an institutional researcher on our committee, and she's able to bring to us our persistent rate, our transfer rates, our graduation rates, anything that she sees as a change in trend.
About 2006 is when we really started kicking into that area of, oh my gosh, we got to really start monitoring this data, and we've got to start tracking it, and we've got to start collecting it and looking at it longitudinally so that we can start making some decisions based on trends and stuff like that. Probably the catalyst for that was the Title III grant, and then also our change to an AQUIP model for accreditation, which is an academic quality improvement program. And part of that process for AQUIP is to develop processes and use data for decision making. And that was really the big catalyst for us as far as okay, we've really got to start knuckling down, tracking this information, and collecting it.
Just looking at the statistics of it all, how many students this year were reported on early alert, and what are the ethnicity of those students? And is that, are we on a decline or are we on an increase? And then I can take those numbers at the end of each year and we can determine, you know, hey, do we need to make some improvements, or are we being more effective in helping students not need to be on early alert? The whole purpose of early alert is to make sure that if they're not doing well at the beginning of the semester, that we catch them early, we have the conversation with them, we hook them up with the student services so that they can get the tutoring, or they can get the advising or disability services, whatever they might need.
We decided that in our freshman year seminar class that's required for all freshmen, that there would be a required assignment where the student would have to visit their academic advisor so many times throughout their first semester to start building a type of rapport with the student advisor, so that the student really felt like that they could receive that support with whatever need that they had to help them continue on through their academics. And that, I think, that's a very critical area of the college, and why we've had success too with some of our retention, is being able to give the students the information in a timely manner that they need it through that freshman year seminar class, which is a kind of an orientation class, you know, and feed them a little bit of information throughout the first 8 weeks of school, instead of one big orientation day that students aren't necessarily listening to the information but checking out the young ladies beside them, you know, and then they don't hear that one day. So I think that's very instrumental. And it really is a vehicle or a way in which we can get the student then to go meet their advisor and establish that relationship through those mandatory assignments through the freshman year seminar class. All the initiatives that we worked on the last 4 years not only helped our Hispanic student body, but it helped our overall college retention. Because when we're talking about increasing our number of times we're offering financial aid workshops, and that freshman year essay to help complete for scholarships, we did that with all students. So not only did we see our Hispanic student completion rate rise, we saw our overall student body retention rate rise, which was pretty exciting. So every year, this retention committee sits down and we look at our short and our long-term goals. And now what we're looking at is our completion agenda. That's a nationwide initiative. And research has taught us that students that complete their first 24 credit hours are more likely going to persist and be retained and complete than if they did not complete those first 24 credit hours. So we're really looking at what initiatives can we put in place to really massage those first 24 credit hours or assist students in completing those, and that's what our committee's now focusing on.
I tell our faculty and staff, I think that's a real credit to them, because I think our students, when we start looking at that data, over 70% first generation, over 85% taking a developmental class, the majority coming from homes that English is not the primary language, and yet our graduation, our retention rates exceed the other colleges in the state. I think that's something that we can be very proud of, and I'm glad that our faculty and staff see that that's a value to the students.
We encourage you to pause the program at this point to discuss how your institution is addressing the first-year experience needs of your students.
I think all community colleges have been traditionally focused on access. That is our mission. We're really intent on increasing higher education participation of underserved populations, as well as the population in general. And increasingly, the colleges have begun focusing on success rates, retention, and more lately, completion. A couple of things are driving this. American Association of Community Colleges developed a report called Reclaiming the American Dream. And they were talking about redesigning, reinventing, resetting higher education so it is more focused on completion. Because they began listening around the country to professionals and heard that we're doing a great job with access, but not necessarily as great a job with completion. And unfortunately, some of the completion data that we have currently doesn't tell the whole story of community colleges. It focuses on the right to know IPEDS data, which for community colleges might be, 29–30% of the students complete a degree over time within a period of 2 times the normal rate, which would be about 4 years. But a lot of the community college students are coming for other purposes. And we've had a hard time telling that story, but we've also had a hard time looking at what we can do to improve. When the Gates Foundation approached Texas about being part of Completion by Design and looking at our data from 2006, the colleges that went in to develop a proposal to the Gates Foundation began really thinking through what does that data mean in terms of what policies and procedures, what practice do we need to change. We won the first round, and we actually worked with the Gates Foundation for about a year in the planning phase. And they brought in consultants from the Community College Research Council, from Jobs for the Future, and we looked at best practice, we looked at our own data, we looked at what our students had said through things like the Community College Survey of Engagement, the CESE data, and we determined that it needed to be not pilot programs, not small scale programs that we did, but that it needed to be systemic change. And that was how DCCCD got involved. We were not selected as a state to participate in Completion by Design, but the colleges who developed the proposal determined that it would be in our best interest to go ahead with our action planning, because we had done focus groups, we had done student surveys, we had gotten a lot of information on what we needed to tackle.
About 2 years ago, 5 Texas community colleges banded together in a partnership focused on transforming our institutions to better serve our students. As part of the Completion by Design, is what it was originally called, planning phase, the 5 Texas Completes colleges, Alamo, Dallas, El Paso, South Texas, Lone Star, spent an intensive 18 months in research, engagement, and planning to transform our institutions, to transform our policies, and to transform our students' experience. The mission of Texas Completes is twofold. First, to leverage and accelerate existing reform efforts to create a center of gravity for innovation in an effort to help more students find their way and stay on track through college. The second mission of Texas Completes is to create a clear road to associate degree attainment, credential completion, and improved transfer, while breaking down silos within colleges and at the same time creating the infrastructure for coherency among our institutions across the state.
And so even though Texas Completes is a separate group of people who meet on a monthly basis and do planning, they are representative of councils or committees already. And they go back to their councils or committees or colleges and do the work of the team. And that way we've been able to identify who are the key players to improve the system as a whole versus having a new program.
Over the past 24 months, 18 of them, by the way, in an intensive planning phase, Texas Completes worked to build a framework for changing the student experience by focusing on the redesign of student pathways. Anna Mays, as the Texas Completes lead for Dallas, can you speak to how Texas Completes is different from other initiatives like, for instance, Achieve the Dream, And give us an example of how Dallas, you've changed the student experience.
One of the things we realized from the beginning when we were looking at the data from 2006 on our students' completion was that we needed to take a systems approach across our district, and we needed to align ourselves with a transformation of developmental education, of TSI assessment, of the redesign of the core curriculum, and also focus on councils or governing bodies that had the power across the district to make changes. That was our strategy from the beginning, and as a result, we were able to enlist the governance or organized bodies that had responsibility for these initiatives into a completion agenda focus. It was helpful to have many of the leaders of those reform efforts on our Texas Completes Council at the district level, but it was also very important that we engage the whole district. We've had more marketing about Texas Completes than any other initiative across our district. We've done workshops, we've done a lot of in-services, and faculty have, at the district level, engaged other faculty through district faculty development workshops. One of the most important things we've done recently was to pass some policy changes as well, including not requiring application for graduation. We worked with the Academic Advising Council and the National Association of Academic Advising at this national level and taken vice presidents, presidents, faculty, deans to a NACADA Institute where we redesigned academic advising at the district level and focused on the teaching and learning that advisors can do at each of the stages of the student experience, connection, entry, progress, and completion. As a result of our really intensive efforts, we've already seen increases in graduation. In the past year, we've had over 14% increase as of this fall, and at some of our colleges. One of the advantages of having a statewide initiative versus a smaller type of initiative is having a larger impact and having the ability to define what are the main strategies that you're using that are having the impact. One of the things what we were able to do through our data analysis is determine what initiatives were going to make the most sense to do that would be scalable, that would impact large numbers. And if we do this well, we will be able to define exactly what has the greatest impact. We will be able to look across the colleges and districts to see who's moving the needle fastest. We'll be able to determine what we can recommend to the legislators and to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board as good practice that can be sustained over time. And we're also looking at cost efficiencies, because if it's something that is going to be too expensive to sustain, given funding probably won't increase substantially, then that can be part of the research and sharing that we do in our reports. What we looked at is a student's experience, and what we said is what were key things along the student's experience and that needed to be improved.
I was actually doing nothing. I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants and kind of woke up one morning and was like, this is old. I want a tomorrow, and decided that I wanted to go back to college.
The connection phase is the phase where they're leaving high school and going into college. The next phase is entry, and with entry it might be new student orientation, it might be advising, preparation for placement testing. For progress, a lot of colleges hadn't really defined, well, what do we need to do with students while they're in between 15 and 30 credit hours. So that was something that was relatively new to our attention, and we started talking about how the revision of the core curriculum, for example, is going to impact progress of students towards their completion of that core.
Knowing and making sure you're taking the correct classes, because I want to get in, get out, and continue on so I can start my career. I don't want to be a college student for many, many years more than I need to be.
My plan was just to come here and just, you know, whatever someone puts on my plate, I'm going to eat it. But it was more like building a healthy diet for my plan. Like, you don't really need that, you need this. And plan on doing it in this amount of time. And if you're going to do that, then you need to do it this way.
We talked about how, as a goal, we really wanted to identify key touch points along the student's experience in order to improve their awareness of where they were with their progress. With completion, we started talking about how do we make graduation more seamless? How do we break down some barriers so students can graduate easier and they can be notified of where they are with their status so they can graduate. So we really looked at, along the student's experience, how could we improve their progress to the next step or phase, and then how can we ultimately improve certificate and degree completion. I think we've made most progress with a couple of things. One, we've been able to really look at advising more holistically across the district. We had consultants from the National Academic Advising Council come to talk with all of our academic advisors across the district and talk about best practice in academic advising. And we talked about a new framework of using a syllabus of advising, which defined the mission, the expectations of the advisor, the expectations of the students in very specific terms, and then resources that advisors could use so that everybody could be on the same page. And that was the first time in the district we had done that to that extent. And now all colleges have an academic advising syllabus that they share with their students, and they talk to the students about, okay, you're in the entry phase, for example. You just started out, you don't have 15 credit hours yet, but that's your goal. And let's talk about what critical things you need to do and learn during this first phase of your experience. And then showing them the different phases that they're going to go through and what else they'll need to learn. And it's more than just registering students. So we really talked about in advising separating the teaching and learning component of advising from the registration process.
The role of academic advising has changed tremendously. We are no longer registrants and helping students to just focus on curriculum. At this point, we're helping students to develop their educational plan. So academic advisors are no longer called academic advisors. Instead, we are educational planners, whereby we help students to decide on a career pathway. We help them to focus on career and workforce training programs. We help students to decide on what are the best courses for your career path. We also have an advantage in looking at student test scores to decide if there's a need for diagnostic help and helping them to realize what are their weaknesses. For instance, in math or basic reading and writing, what courses do you need to work on in order to strengthen your background so that you can move forward to be successful? I think it's important for academic advisors to provide an academic advising syllabus, which is what we're using here at Cedar Valley College. And it's a lot like the syllabus that's used in the instruction area. It explains exactly to the student what their role is in advising and how they should come prepared to the advising session by bringing their transcripts, by having their program of study on hand and being familiar with it, so that students actually enter into a contract with the academic advisor, knowing what their role is and knowing exactly what the academic advisor's role is, so that both enter into this partnership and they're engaging in conversations that will help the student to make the best decision. It's a two-way street, and it requires that the student is as prepared as the academic advisor, knowing that the advisor is the expert, but having the student to realize that they too must do their homework in order to have an intelligent discussion and an intelligent academic advising type session, and not just a meeting of registering for classes.
One of the things that we're required by state mandate now to do is to prepare students for the Texas Success Initiative assessment, the TSI assessment. It is a new assessment effective August 26, 2013. It was developed by the College Board. It replaces AccuPlacer as our assessment for incoming students who we need to determine whether or not they're college ready for courses, college level courses. And the pre-assessment activity is designed to give students information about how they need to prepare for it, what it is, as well as practice tests. And in DCCCD, a committee determined that the best avenue for our students would be to have something totally online, and was designed to give them information, but also give them a chance to practice sample questions from the assessment. It is a diagnostic assessment, and it does take longer than the AccuPlacer did. So just sharing all that information with the student is critical. And then the report that is generated is shared with the student as well as the advisor, and then the faculty member has access to it as well to determine where students need to improve and what they have already mastered. The third thing we've really done that has impacted our graduation rates is we began informing students when they had either gotten close to completing the core or taken one of the last courses in a certificate program that was required, that they were nearing completion of a certificate or degree. And informing them that they needed to go see their advisor, they needed to see the degree audit specialist, because they were ready to apply for graduation. And a lot of the students were not aware that they were that close. And so we saw some significant immediate results from that. In 1 year, for example, at Cedar Valley College, where I work, our certificate completion rate jumped 27%. Because, again, we were identifying students who were close to completion, sending them message. With the associate degrees, we had an 11% increase in a year. And then that we think is sustainable. You know, we think we can do that every year because it's more students over a longer period of time. And we're also encouraging students who are getting associate degrees in technical programs to look at completing a certificate before they complete their associate degree, because a lot of the technical programs have certificates embedded in them. And we now automatically, if they get to the associate degree and they forgot to apply for graduation, we automatically grant them their certificate if they're eligible for it, as well as the degree. And that has, you know, again, improved our completion rates pretty substantially. One more thing we did with policy, because that was important too, it is no longer required that students apply for graduation. We encourage them to do so, But if they forget to and they transfer to another university, we have identified them, can't contact them, they haven't been able to, give us current information, we automatically graduate them. And that way they'll have it on their transcript, so when they, request a transcript later, they'll see, yes, I did graduate from that college. One of the things that we don't know with the new success points or momentum points that are in the performance-based funding model, we've got some baseline information on where we are now. We're not quite sure how that's going to impact us in the future because it talks about points for different achievements by students, completing developmental education, completing 15 hours, 30 hours, certificates, degrees, and points awarded for that. So it'll be interesting for us to see how that impacts our funding over time. That's one issue. From the student perspective, tracking their program of study and keeping on track is really critical. When we studied our data, we found that students who had taken a certain number of credit hours, 6 credit hours, in their first year and had successfully completed them and gone to the next level immediately of that same discipline did better. So we could see that they were basically following a pathway. What we're trying to encourage students to do is to continue following that pathway and not drop out, not reduce their attendance because it delays their graduation or completion. One tool that we're in the midst of developing is going to be a software that enables the student to know, once they've decided what their program of study is, how many credits they're going to need, and to track it so that they can track their own pathway and see where they are, how many credits they have left, what courses they have left, and can keep it current. And it will interface with our student information system so they can access it on the web any place and can maintain it even if they leave and come back. So that's going to be important because right now we're concerned about having enough advisors to manage the student tracking perspective. One of the things we're doing during the year is each semester we have a commit to completion student event. We have food, which students love, and we have like a celebration and a pledge where they're pledging to complete a degree or certificate. And we're trying to really emphasize the importance to the students so they don't think it's just, oh, I have to complete a degree, but it's something exciting to look forward to. And trying to get them more information about how it impacts their wages too, because there's some significant changes from high school completion to associate degree completion to bachelor degree completion in terms of annual wages.
We trust you enjoyed this presentation from Starlink First Year Experience Part 2, Advising and Counseling. For more information about helping your students complete their academic goals, refer to your resource packet.